Good morning, everyone. I'm Riley King. Welcome to the RK Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network, where we have your national news, international news, business news, and political news. Let's begin. First up, let's talk about the live updates for George Floyd protests. Live updates. Officers shot in Vegas and St. Louis, we are hearing. 2 shootings took place in protests Monday night. In today's biggest developments, 2 police officers shot in Las Vegas, 4 police officers shot in St. Louis. Protest arrests continued despite curfews in many cities. And those are your updates on the latest of the George Floyd protest nationwide. Anger across U.S. as protesters clash with police. Let's take a listen to that video from ABC News.
Night underway in New York, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Denver, and elsewhere in this country. And here in New York City tonight, where tension has been growing in the overnight hours for several days now, there is now a curfew in place at 11 p.m. tonight. The NYPD is now doubling its force. Again tonight, Stephanie Ramos here in New York.
Tonight, protesters filling the streets of New York as the city announces a new curfew at 11 o'clock. After a night of looting, the number of police officers doubled.
The sun has gone down here in New York City, and there are clearly different groups that are out here facing off with police, shattering windows here along Fifth Avenue.
For days, though, thousands have peacefully protested in 140 cities over the death of George Floyd. But this weekend, rage and pain in America. From coast to coast, a weekend of violent clashes. Police unloading pepper spray on protesters at close range in Portland, Oregon. Using tear gas to hold back crowds in North Carolina. Demonstrations turning violent. Others taking advantage of the chaos, looting in major cities like Boston and Philadelphia. In the nation's capital, smoke seen near the White House. Police firing tear gas as people set cars and buildings on fire. The National Guard activated in 25 states and Washington, D.C. But despite the flashes of violence and destruction, demonstrators determined to stay focused and have their message heard.
The focus should be peace. Come in peace. Say what you have to do. Say what you have to say. Black Lives Matter. That's the message. Period. That's it. Look at us. Peaceful. That's all. Just hear us.
George Floyd! I can't watch no more of this. I'm sorry. But if I see one more name of another brother dead, I'm going to lose it. I'm really going to lose my mind.
Demonstrators shutting down the Manhattan Bridge, holding a moment of silence in Times Square for George Floyd.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Oh my God.
A giant.
Oh my gosh.
This is very dangerous.
Oh my gosh.
Today, new details about those terrifying moments on a Minneapolis bridge when a tanker truck came barreling toward a crowd. Officials say the driver likely panicked. He told the governor the crowd moved in to help him. And an investigation now underway after an NYPD patrol car drove into a crowd behind a barricade. The police commissioner saying at times his officers also came under attack.
It's a very difficult situation without a good ending either way. That is on the heels of Molotov cocktails being thrown at police officers.
Amid calls to end police brutality, disturbing scenes unfolding. This one in Seattle, an officer using his knee to pin down a protester until his fellow officer pushes it away. Police in Atlanta firing the 2 officers seen smashing the windows of this car, tasing the college students inside, then violently dragging them out. And in New York, outrage over the use of force. This woman taken to the hospital after being shoved to the ground. The mayor calling for another officer who pulled a gun on a group of protesters to be fired.
Any officer who should not be wearing that uniform needs to get off this force.
And David, police here in New York City believe there are a number of outside groups that are infiltrating peaceful protests. And I can tell you, just a few moments ago, things were really tense here with demonstrators facing off with NYPD officers, demanding they take a knee and demanding justice. David.
Stephanie Ramos with the scene right behind her, the protests here in New York tonight. Stephanie, thanks.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. How plastic dumped illegally in Ethiopia is entering the food chain. Let's take a listen to that video from Sky News.
Hard to believe there's a partial ban on plastic bags in Ethiopia. It's just not working. Instead, with little recycling to talk of, there are huge illegal plastic wastelands. Ethiopia's population is growing fast, but so too is its plastic consumption. And almost half of the plastic used here is discarded improperly. It's getting into the food chain. The sight you're about to see is shockingly familiar in parts of rural Ethiopia. The young calf is getting local anaesthetic. The animal will stay awake whilst they cut open its rumen and see what's causing a blockage in the stomach.
This one is a foreign body.
That is plastic. That looks like a plastic bag,
Yeah,
right?
This is plastic one. This one?
Oh, that is quite a big bit of plastic as well.
I couldn't explain. It is very bad for us also, you know. This reduces the movement of the rumen, so anything cannot go to the next compartment. So it will accumulate inside the rumen. So it is very difficult for the animal.
And there's even more to come.
Look how the stomach's gone down so much already.
Yes. Ow.
Jeez, they're having trouble pulling it out. Oh, my God.
This one,
It's hard, right?
plastic. This is a big problem for us. So we should combat this problem, since we don't have a good management of wastage disposal. Everybody is dumping these plastic bags to the everywhere, so the animal will eat.
In amongst all of this is someone's plastic hairband. There's plastic bags, there's huge tangled web of plastic, which is some of it which has solidified, it's been in there. All this in a 1-year-old calf. The vets are even surprised. And I think it's indicative of just how bad the problem is becoming and the sheer scale of it.
Within an hour, the calf is looking a little bit stunned, but pretty much back to normal. But the vets fully expect to see him again.
But do you think the chances are that he'll be back again?
Yeah, he will be back. He will be back.
And it's not just the animals in danger. Scientists believe microplastics are being disseminated through the soil and then into the water table. If there's a problem here at one of the sources of the River Nile, what are the implications for the 300 million people reliant on Africa's longest waterway for their survival? Alex Crawford, Sky News, Ethiopia.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. Dick's Sporting Goods post earnings miss despite Q1. E-commerce sales rising 110%. Let's take a listen to that video from CNBC.
Earnings just coming out from Dick's Sporting Goods, the company posting an adjusted quarterly loss of 62 cents per share. Analysts had been predicting a 57-cent loss. Now, revenue and comp store sales also missing as stores closed due to the coronavirus outbreak. One bright spot, e-commerce sales more than doubled during the quarter. And Dick says that momentum has carried into the current quarter. You're looking at the stock up there about 4%. But again, a lot of people, to the extent they could buy sporting goods and other other things. We're doing it at places that were deemed essential, like the Targets and the Walmarts, and I know the frustration of so many other businesses out there about that.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. Dow features jump as investors focus on the economy reopening despite civil unrest. U.S. stock features were higher in early trading on Tuesday as investors looked past civil unrest around the country and focused on reopening the economy from the coronavirus pandemic. Trump urges governors to be tougher in crackdowns on protests. Let's take a listen to that video from MSNBC News.
Eddie, the president sounding like an I don't know what on this call, sounding like not sounding like a president, not sounding like a leader. And as we've talked about, as Alexi, as we've all discussed over the last hour and a half, such a contrast from a grieving brother, Terrence Floyd, as Alexi said, calling on people to work within the system, to go vote, while Donald Trump tells governors to treat a protester throwing a rock the same way they would treat someone shooting a gun, on the heels of tweets calling for looters to be shot.
Yeah, we know Donald Trump has authoritarian tendencies to be generous. We know that he has not governed for the entire nation. He's only governed in light of a small percentage of the country. And what we're seeing over the course of this crisis that we're currently in is that it's not only in terms of a political calculus, that Donald Trump simply doesn't care about all of the country. He doesn't have the capacity to empathize with people's suffering. That much is clear. But it's obvious that certain portions, certain populations just simply don't come into his view, such that he could extend a sense of moral concern for them. And so in some ways, he's a reflection of an exaggerated sense of policy orientation to a certain segment of the country. He ignores us like certain policy positions ignore us, if that makes sense to you. So to be honest with you, Nicole, I don't want to hear from him. I don't want to hear from him because I don't think he'll help at all.
Well, Alexi, this is where, Eddie, and we heard the Mayor Bottoms of Atlanta say, he shouldn't say anything. And I know from my own conversations that Trump's allies in the Republican Party didn't want to hear from him either on Saturday night, as many American cities burned. I mean, this is a place where there is some agreement across the partisan divide.
Yeah, after the coronavirus and he started doing these daily briefings, his allies saw that, President Trump at the podium is detrimental to himself. President Trump on Twitter is good for his standing, usually until something like this, and he can't control himself and the things that he says. I think what's interesting with this call that he had with governors today is that we hear in no uncertain terms not only how he feels about the situation going on, but the hierarchy that he believes exists among governors, protesters, thugs, as he calls them, black and brown folks, the people who don't look like him. We see the way in which he turns so many people into an other. But what is alarming now is that he is sending these ominous tweets about shooting looters and telling governors that they look weak, and that saying that someone throwing a rock is similar to shooting a gun. That just doesn't make any sense. And the only point is to incite more violence, but against people who he thinks looks nothing like him and are working against him because they're exercising their First Amendment right. That is what's really disheartening and really alarming in this moment. President Trump can otherize people of all stripes in different ways. Now it is turning into inciting violence against those people, and there are no uncertain terms about that.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. And thank you for watching this morning edition of the RK Newscast right here on the Riley King Network. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you back here later on today for another edition of the RK Newscast. Goodbye, everyone.